Today, I want to talk about de-influencing, and specifically, products your home doesn't need. These are the things I see getting pushed constantly on social media, but in reality, they just aren't worth your money. But before we start, I want to take a second to talk about what de-influencing actually is, because I think it's pretty interesting. At its core, de-influencing means pushing back against all the selling we're exposed to online. It's about questioning the impulse to buy something just because it's packaged well, filmed beautifully, and framed as a must have. But that impulse is so strong because a lot of what we see online is designed to create a low level sense of urgency or insecurity. Like your home is unfinished, outdated, or somehow lacking unless we buy this one specific item. And when you see that message repeated over and over again, it starts to feel true even when it's not. So, this list isn't about hating on products or becoming a minimalist. It's about being more honest about what actually adds value versus what just looks good on camera. So the first item on the list is statement mirrors with funky frames. And look, I totally get why these are so popular, because one of the most common traps people fall into with trendy home items is confusing visibility with value. Because if something shows up everywhere, on TikTok, Pinterest, and Instagram, it starts to feel like it's a safe design choice. But that's usually the problem, because these kinds of statement mirrors aren't designed to support your space. They're designed to announce themselves. And the louder that announcement, the harder it becomes for everything else in the room to exist comfortably around them. Because when these mirrors rely on LED lights, wavy silhouettes, and unusual frames, they don't just reflect the room, they redefine the room's personality, whether you want them to or not. And once that happens, your room stops feeling flexible and starts feeling locked into a very specific moment in time. Not because mirrors are bad. Mirrors are one of the most useful decor items you can have in a home. But when the mirror becomes the concept itself, everything else has to submit to it. Furniture, art, lighting, and the entire mood of the space all end up orbiting this one object. And that's usually when a room starts to feel more like a backdrop for photos than a place you actually live in. So at first, it feels bold and fun, but over time, it becomes harder to add anything to the room without it clashing with the mirror, so the room just loses all its flexibility. And that's the quiet downside of most trendy statement pieces. They don't age with your home, they actually age against it. Now, if you like funky shaped mirrors, you don't need to give them up entirely. You just need to soften the execution. And curvy mirrors with wooden frames are a really good alternative here. You still get the movement and personality you're looking for, but the natural wood ensures the mirror is easy to live with over time. So it adds that visual interest that you don't get from a regular shaped mirror without forcing itself as the star of the room. And if you're drawn to color, opt for a more muted tone instead of something bold and glossy, because softer finishes and slimmer frames let the mirror play its role without overpowering your space. Because really, a good mirror should almost disappear. It should bounce light, extend the space, and quietly support the room you already have. But when the mirror itself becomes the loudest voice in the room, it's usually something you need to change. Now, another pattern you start to notice when you look closely at real homes is how clutter rarely comes from too much stuff. It usually comes from the wrong kind of stuff. And this is especially common in kitchens, where a lot of people love to buy gimmicky gadgets to solve very specific problems. And yes, I'm talking about that tool you bought from an infomercial 7 years ago and only used twice. Because kitchens work best when the tools inside them are flexible, stackable, and easy to stow away. But when you've got a dozen different gadgets that only do one job each, they really make your place a cluttered mess, and your kitchen quietly becomes harder to use. And yes, I can already hear the comments coming in. Oh, I love my magic bullet, or I could never live without my slap chop. And I'm totally with you. Vince is a legend who should be celebrated in the Infomercial Hall of Fame. But it's not the slap chop I'm talking about here, because we all saw how impressive that is. I'm talking about the one-trick ponies of the kitchen gadget world. The ones that feel exciting at first, but just end up in the back of your cupboard after 2 weeks of sporadic use. And over time, this is what makes your kitchen feel crowded, even when you're not cooking any more than you used to. And then, your space stops feeling intuitive, things don't flow, and suddenly you're working around your tools instead of with them. For example, think about a mini waffle maker. It looks fun and harmless at first, but the moment you try to make more than one waffle, which you almost certainly will every time you make waffles, the problem becomes obvious. It only makes one tiny waffle at a time, so instead of whipping up some waffles and enjoying them, you're stuck waiting 20 or 30 minutes just to get a few, at which point the first waffles you made are already cold. So this is a perfect example of a gadget that prioritizes fun over functionality. And then there's cotton candy machines. And I get it, cotton candy is nostalgic, and a machine feels like a fun thing to own. But come on, you're not living in an amusement park. Maybe you have some space in your garage where you can store the machine for the 364 days a year you're not using it. But if you don't, and especially if you live in an apartment, what are you doing? And I could go on and on with this stuff, from popcorn makers to egg poachers and all the rest. But really, the common thread here is that these gadgets look great in product demos, but after they're in your kitchen for a while, they start feeling like dead weight. So if you realize you've got some kitchen gadgets that you no longer need, what should you do with them? Well, I'd recommend giving them to a neighborhood kid. Seriously, if you've got a cotton candy machine and you give that to a kid in your neighborhood, that will make their year. In the same way that when some guy in my neighborhood gave me a giant Scooby-Doo stuffed animal as a kid, I was over the moon and I walked home with that thing as if I were carrying an Olympic gold medal. So if you've got the opportunity to do that and clear out some space in your kitchen at the same time, take it. Even if it's something like a waffle maker, kids love that kind of thing. They'll get the same kind of joy out of it that you were hoping for when you bought it. So that's my best advice here. Don't get rid of the tools you use regularly like your rice cooker or your air fryer, but get rid of the gimmicks so your kitchen can finally breathe again. Now, this next one is a little different because rather than an individual item, I'm talking about maximalist design as a whole. Because spaces that follow the principles of maximalist design, or its closely related cousin dopamine decor, they're meant to feel good. They're built around bright colors, playful shapes, bold patterns, and furniture that doesn't take itself too seriously. And online, they're incredibly appealing because they photograph beautifully, they feel expressive, and they instantly stand out when you're scrolling. But the problem with these spaces usually isn't the color or the playfulness or even the idea of maximalism itself. The problem is what happens when everything in the room is trying to be the star. Because in a lot of maximalist rooms, nothing is allowed to sit quietly in the background. The seating is bold, the art is bold, the rug is bold, and the accessories are bold. But because everything is competing for your attention at the same time, your eye never gets a place to land. There's no hierarchy, no pause, and no sense of what's actually important. So instead of feeling energized, the room just feels noisy. And that matters because a home isn't something you look at for 5 seconds. You also have to live in it. You move through it, you sit in it when you're tired, and you wake up to it when your brain is already full. So when your space constantly demands your attention, it becomes surprisingly exhausting over time. And that's why a lot of these rooms feel fun at first, but are hard to live with long term. And then another issue is flexibility, because when a room is built entirely out of novelty, novel shapes, novel colors, and novel furniture pieces, it doesn't leave much room for change. And so adding something new becomes difficult because anything you bring in either clashes or disappears. And removing something also can create an odd gap in the room because every piece was carrying so much visual weight. So instead of a space that evolves with you, you end up with a space that's frozen in one very specific moment. And again, this isn't saying bold maximalist homes are bad. If you like that look, go for it. This is about understanding that even playful spaces still need structure. They still need contrast between loud and quiet. And they still need pieces that act as supporting actors in the room, not just the star. And that's why louder spaces tend to work best with at least a little bit of restraint. Because color can still work, just not on every surface all at once. And that's why having softer backdrops, quieter walls, and neutral supporting pieces give your more expressive elements somewhere to land. And this also helps avoid rooms that are just too intense, because highly saturated colors, glossy surfaces, and unusual shapes all stack different layers of stimulation on top of each other. But muted tones, matte textures, and more familiar forms slow the room down and make the bold moments easier to live with over time. Because your home's personality shouldn't come from everything asking for attention all at once. It should come from choosing what matters most and letting the rest of the room quietly support that choice. And when you design that way, the playful elements no longer feel overwhelming, they feel deliberate. Plus, your space stays more flexible, so it can evolve without needing to be completely overhauled every time your taste shifts. So, acrylic furniture. It often looks clever at first because it feels light, it virtually disappears, and on paper, it sounds like the perfect solution for small modern spaces. But the second you start living with it, that illusion of grandeur starts to fall apart. Scratches show up immediately, fingerprints never stop, and scuffs catch the light in a way you can't ignore. And so what was supposed to feel sleek starts to look tired way faster than most people expect. And the biggest regrets usually come from larger acrylic pieces like desks, consoles, and dining tables. They often feel flimsy even when they're expensive, and instead of fading into the background, they reflect everything around them, which makes the room feel loud. So rather than calming the space down like a nice wood table would, they quietly make it feel unsettled. And acrylic dining tables and chairs are especially unforgiving. Some of them creak, basically all of them scratch, and over time they lose that crisp clarity and start to look cloudy and worn, which is not a good look. And seriously, who wants to see everyone else's legs when they're sitting around the dining table? I mean, I don't want to see your feet under my plate, and I don't think you want to see mine either, so this is just a big miss. But if you really like the look of transparent furniture, you don't have to avoid it completely, you just have to make sure those pieces still have weight and support. So generally, glass is a much better option than acrylic. It feels more substantial, it ages better, and even when it's clear, it carries a sense of intention that plastic just lacks. And the key difference is that glass still feels like a material, not like it's trying to disappear. But to be clear, a glass tabletop works best when it's combined with a solid base, so something like wood, metal, or stone, so the piece still feels anchored. You don't want to have a fully glass table because then you have the same disappearance problem as you do with acrylic. But when transparent materials like glass are supported by something heavier, they stop looking like they're floating aimlessly and start feeling like they belong in the space. And if you're drawn to acrylic specifically, look for thicker pieces, rounded corners, and color. This gives the piece more depth and visual presence, so it doesn't feel flimsy or temporary. And the color adds warmth and weight, which helps the piece sit more comfortably in your space. Now, after a while, you'll start to notice that trends don't just show up as big furniture or statement pieces, they also sneak in through small, seemingly harmless upgrades. And believe it or not, this often happens in the bathroom. Because we've all got a bathroom routine, so anything that promises to make those routines easier or more fun can seem like an easy win. And at first, these things usually do feel fun. For example, LED shower heads that light up while the water's running. The first few times, this can feel playful and luxurious, but pretty quickly you realize the light isn't improving your shower experience at all, and it's just completely unnecessary. Or how about toilet nightlights that blink or glow in the dark? These are marketed as helpful, especially at night, but in practice, they're just distracting. And motion sensor toothpaste dispensers are the exact same. I mean, can we really not squeeze our own toothpaste anymore? Really? Like, this is making your bathroom experience more complicated, not less. So this is just a cheap gimmick that's fun to talk about with your friends for 2 minutes, but ultimately everyone can see through the charade. Some things just aren't worth automating. And themed toilet paper follows the same pattern. It's fun at first, and it gets a reaction from your guests, but after a while, it just becomes visual clutter in a room that benefits from staying neutral and simple. And when taking something out of a space immediately makes it feel calmer and easier to use, that's usually a sign it was never really needed in the first place. Now, if what you're really trying to do is upgrade your bathroom, the solution is not adding novelty gadgets. No, there are at least a few other things you should focus on instead. First, bathrooms work best when they're simple and predictable. You want the space to wake you up gently in the morning and calm you down at night, not surprise you. And that's why lighting in a bathroom should be layered, subtle, and built into the space rather than added on at the end as a gimmick. So instead of lights that change color, blink, or react to motion, focus on where the glow comes from. Soft, indirect light around the mirror, gentle illumination tucked into niches and behind surfaces, and task lighting that's clear and functional, paired with ambient light that stays quiet in the background. Because when your bathroom lights are doing their job, they don't need to announce themselves. And this approach does two things. First, it improves how the bathroom functions because you can see clearly what you need to see without any of that harsh glare. And second, it creates a pleasant atmosphere that you actually want to spend time in, which you can't say about a bathroom whose primary light source is inside the toilet. And this same thinking applies to everything else in the room. Bathrooms benefit especially strongly from restraint because they're already full of hard surfaces, reflections, and routines. So when you keep the palette simple and the details highly curated, the entire room feels easier to use. Nothing distracts you and nothing needs to be managed or explained. And that's really the difference between a bathroom that feels high-end and one that feels gimmicky. Because luxury in a bathroom doesn't come from adding more features. It comes from removing friction. And when the room feels calm, clear, and easy to navigate through, that's when it actually starts to feel good. And that's why the best bathrooms are usually the quietest ones. So why does any of this matter when it comes to your home? Well, it's because most homes don't feel off due to a lack of style. They feel off because of too many things trying to be important at the same time. And trendy items make that problem worse, not better, because these items promise that this one piece will finally make your room feel finished. But what they actually do is add all kinds of visual and mental noise without ever fixing the real issue underneath. But once you recognize this, you stop falling into their trap. Because really, every item I've talked about here has the same hidden downside. It steals attention from the parts of your home that actually matter. But your home doesn't need more personality. It needs more stability. The internet sells personality because it's easy to market, but stability is quieter and it comes from a few grounded decisions that don't change every season, materials you can live with, forms that don't fight each other, and a baseline palette that lets accents be accents instead of a constant performance. So if you're serious about improving how your home looks and feels, check out the link in the description. I've developed an entire suite of tools and frameworks specifically to help you create a beautiful home, so I hope you enjoy. But the next step here isn't becoming a minimalist or swearing off everything fun. It's choosing the kind of fun your future self won't regret. So watch this video next to learn how to make your home the kind of exciting, beautiful place you love to spend time in. I'll see you there.